Why I love Fantastic Four and Spider-Man 2. Hey everyone, it's Gina. I wanted to make videos other than talking about being trans, obviously, and I've been recording a lot of Doom footage, and I decided that because I read a lot of comics, like one of my other passions is comics, I figured it would be fun to talk about comic books that I enjoy, and just maybe tell you why I really like them, I guess. I also figured out how to put pictures off my phone on here, so I'll be doing that quite a bit actually. And so yeah, I'll be giving you visual aids as we go along through this journey of me talking about my favorite comics. Now, I can tell you offhand that my top three are Superman, Spider-Man, and Fantastic Four. And Superman and Spider-Man are tied. I can't choose a favorite. Those two are my top two superhero characters of all time. Every time I see a Superman or Spider-Man comic, I will buy it post-haste. But there's also another team that is the topic of this video that I also can't. In fact, I have probably more books of them. Well, actually, no. Superman's probably tied, but pretty close to having as many books, or as much books as maybe my Superman collection as my Fantastic Four collection, which is what I'm going to talk about here and why I love them. Now, for those that don't know, the Fantastic Four are the four characters that started off the Marvel Universe in 1961. They are Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman, Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, and Ben Grimm, the Thing. So, why do I like the Fantastic Four, or how did I get into the Fantastic Four? Which is kind of, well, it's not a super interesting story, but why the Fantastic Four? Because for the longest time, if you'd have talked to me before I got back into comics, because I read comics in the 80s as a small kid. I read comics, I had some of the original Amazing Spider-Mans. I had actually some of the original Secret Wars, the 1984 Secret Wars comic book, and Superman too, I should say. I had some Superman. So I mean, I loved Spider-Man and Superman as a kid, and I read them in the 80s, and I read Spider-Man mostly in the 90s. But what really attracts me to characters is if I've seen a movie about them. The only character I can think of that I didn't see a movie before I became a fan was, I mean, I guess Batman too, but the only character that I saw before I was a fan was probably Spider-Man, because Spider-Man didn't have a movie back then. Or back in the 80s when I was a kid, I guess. And I grew up with the Christopher Reeve movies, so I loved them to death. So I became a fan through medium. Like Spider-Man had an 80s cartoon that I watched. So I guess that was my introduction to Spider-Man. I didn't really read the comics until afterwards, but I guess I'm getting off track. So basically what I'm saying is my introduction to these characters was through movies. And it's the same thing for Fantastic Four. These, as far as I'm concerned, pardon me, I can't speak. As far as I'm concerned, these movies that came out in 2005 and 2007, the Fantastic Four movies, are actually, to me, highly underrated. Highly underrated. They get a lot of flack because they get Doctor Doom wrong, whereas at the time, because I hadn't ever picked up a single Fantastic Four issue in my life, how could I tell that Doctor Doom was wrong? He was just Doctor Doom. And ironically, the Spider-Man cartoon that I mentioned earlier featured Doctor Doom as a Spider-Man villain. So I kind of grew up thinking Doc Doom was a Spidey villain, where he's actually a Fantastic Four villain. And so it was kind of an easy entry for me, thinking like, oh my gosh, there's Doctor Doom. I always wondered why, why is he fighting these guys? But I watched that 2005 Fantastic Four movie, and I was actually a pretty big fan of it. I do think it's highly underrated as far as the team is concerned. They get the team dynamic pretty spot on. And so here you are seeing, these four, well, I don't know, was Sue a scientist? I don't think Sue really was a scientist, but you see Sue Storm, I should say, Sue Storm and her brother Johnny going along with Reed into space to beat the Russians into space, because keep in mind, since the Fantastic Four was pretty much the start of the Marvel universe, their motivation for going up into space was that they wanted to beat the Russians. So for whatever reason, Reed Richards thought bringing Sue along was a good idea. I can't remember exactly. It's been explained a couple times in the comics, and I just can't remember offhand why. But he also brought his best friend Ben Grimm along with him, because Grimm was an Air Force test pilot, and he knew how to fly things, and so Reed thought it would be valuable to have Ben along for the ride. And so they went up to space to beat the commies in the space race, pretty much, and their shielding was corrupted, or whatever. Their shielding was damaged by cosmic rays, which gave them all fantastic powers, hence the Fantastic Four, you see. I know, it's origins for dummies, basically. So yeah, what was I saying? So they get these cosmic rays, and Reed Richards, being a humanitarian, and he's a scientist first. He basically creates things and patents them out to the government and to the world. And that's kind of how they pay the bills and stuff. But he's pretty much what as the Thing calls him, the big brain of the group. And it was his experiment, or his rocket testing, that got them their powers in the first place. So Reed, being the humanitarian that he is, says that they need to use their powers for good and to help people, to help make the world better. And see, this is kind of like, I don't know what it is. I think it's just because I love the dynamic. Originally, like I think what I love about the Fantastic Four is that as Stan Lee likes to tout, they are the first real team to really face their own little conflict, right? They would get at each other's throats. They didn't always work as a team. They actually fought against each other a lot. And one of my favorite parts of the Fantastic Four is the fact that the Thing and the Human Torch are kind of always at each other's throats. They've always had a tenuous relationship. They're not the best of friends, and they're on the same team. Like they're in they're in a superhero team together. And to me, that makes, stuff like that, like superheroes having problems, is kind of what Marvel touts themselves as being different from their competitor. Whereas, like, I mean, I shouldn't say that, because DC is kind of caught up in the time since then, but at the time it was seen as pretty unique. Like for example, Spider-Man's just a kid with debt problems, and he has to be at school at certain times, and he doesn't have like like Reed Richards does. He doesn't have like a vast wealth, and that's I guess the one thing is, a lot of the there's a lot of heroes in the Marvel universe that have wealth. Like Reed Richards was born into a rich family. Granted, as far as I know, Sue and Johnny aren't, but it's part of why he's like a humanitarian. But I guess the big reason was I love the team dynamic. Like, there's drama there. The big reason why I love the Fantastic Four is there's drama there, because Reed Richards can stretch, and you know, he's a rigid scientific mind that can stretch his body in many malleable ways, and Sue Storm is the woman of the group who feels invisible. I don't know. Somebody said that their powers were very apropos, and who feels invisible and doesn't feel like she's worthy of the group. So her power is invisibility. Johnny Storm, being a hothead and being a cocky kid, is the Human Torch. He can turn himself into a flame and off. Sue, actually, I should say before I move on, Sue can also do force fields and stuff, as well as turn invisible. And finally, Ben Grimm, who for a long time, Ben Grimm was my favorite out of the Fantastic Four, and I'm sure for a lot of people, he still is, because he's kind of the heart of the team. He's the soft, lovable guy, or or the guy that was kind of a stubborn guy, but he had a big heart. He's a test pilot, and his friend brought him along Reed asked him along as a favor. And he ended up turning him into a giant orange rock monster that he can't change out of. Like, his Reed and Johnny and Sue can all take normal human form when they're, not using their powers. And unfortunately, Ben Grimm has to live as this horrible monster for the rest of his life. And this is another thing. Like Johnny annoys the Thing because he likes to play pranks on the Thing, because the Thing's miserable, right? And so he uses that misery against him, basically, to torment him and make life hard. But another thing is another piece of drama is the fact that Reed can't change him back. He just can't. He can't change Ben back, and he's always felt guilty about it. So they would bicker and argue about being a team, because Reed had corralled them. I mean, granted, they could have said no, really. They made the choice to go with him, but still, Reed felt guilty for many years from bringing them all on this mission. And there's even been stories where they've kind of said, Reed knew the shielding in their ship wasn't going to protect them, and he went ahead anyways. And there's been drama around that. There's also been, you had the drama of Reed and Sue. One of their, they have a great, and I'll get into their co-stars in a bit. They've had a great, before Reed and Sue got married, which I have the comic book of. They were a tenuous couple. They were wanted, or Sue liked Reed, but she didn't realize or think that Reed liked her back. And Reed, just being the nerd that he is, being the shy nerd that he is, didn't realize that this girl liked him too. So that went on for years, and they had some of their supporting cast. Namor the Submariner would always kind of get in the way of and get between them being a couple. And so I mean, they were ripe for drama, I guess. So when I read the 2005 Fantastic Four, or when I saw the movie, I should say, I really liked it at the time. I thought it was a really good movie, and I don't know why, but I didn't really check out, because at that time I don't think I was super into comics, into the comic books as I am now. So I didn't really check them out at that time, but almost a decade, probably not quite. It was 2013, I think. I started reading comics again, ever since I'd quit in the 90s, basically. And I decided to take a chance on the Fantastic Four, and these were some of the things that I found in the books. These were, like, those early Stan Lee, Jack Kirby years are a treat to read if you can. I've read the first. I have the first 18 issues in a collection there that I've read, but the inner turmoil of the group is kind of what I love, and the fact that it's basically a family book. Like, they're a family, but it's also a it's explored. It's basically the appeal of the Fantastic Four for me is it's Star Trek. It's Star Trek. These are travelers that go into space, go into different dimensions and time travel, and for the sake of trying to make humanity better. DC has a comic book called The Challenge of the Unknown, which is essentially their equivalent, and they're astronauts. That's the appeal to me of Fantastic Four, is they're astronauts. They're astronauts with a little bit more flavor. Like, the characters are, like, you have 4 different characters that you can kind of read about and get behind, and oh my gosh, I'm getting coughing here, but I should say hiccups, I should say. Anyways, oh, pardon me for that. I'm sorry. So the appeal is that it's a family book, like later on, and that it's an exploration book, and that they have inner turmoil. It's not like Superman, where Superman, his, like I love Superman. I love his mythos. The reason I love Superman is because he's Americana. He's wholesome. You can count on that character, and I'm gonna definitely 100% make a video about Superman eventually. But and Fantastic Four have have an element of apple pie innocence to them, or you know, not Americana, but very innocent and very, you know, wholesome. Like, they're a family, right? And as time went on in the book, they had kids, and that's kind of what's awesome about the Marvel Universe, is because they do grow up. Everyone, like, grew up, and they started families, or they went to college, or stuff like that. Stuff that I will eventually address, and I guess, to me, that's the strength of Marvel compared to DC, because DC kind of just reboots their universes a lot, which is fine. You have good DC universes that are awesome. Like, for example, the 1986 reboot of DC was awesome. But what I really appreciate about the Marvel Universe, and by extension the Fantastic Four, is that they went from a team of heroes, altruistic heroes, who had a lot of squabbles and money problems, and they were scientists, or Reed was a scientist, and a lot of their stuff was paid for by his scientific discoveries. They were different, and they had their own, like, building headquarter and all that. But what I loved about them is that they were a family that expanded over time. Reed and Sue eventually got married, as I mentioned, and they had kids. They had Franklin. They had why can't I think? They had another daughter that I can't. She doesn't really make it as much to the FF books as probably I would like, because the kids of Reed and Sue are actually some of the most powerful people in the Marvel Universe. They have some of the most powerful abilities and all that stuff. Like, actually, Galactus, one of their and I haven't mentioned the villains yet. They have an amazing set of villains too. A very underrated set of villains. Like, obviously the big ones are Doctor Doom and Galactus and the Silver Surfer, even though Surfer turned into a good guy. But even, like, Annihilus to me is an underrated Marvel villain. He runs the Negative Zone, which is its own, like, world, basically. He pretty much runs it. It's him and Blastar is the other guy that they kind of compete against each other. But the big ones are Doctor Doom. Like, Doctor Doom Doctor Doom is probably the reason that the FF, other than them being the legacy book in Marvel, they're the reason, like, Doctor Doom is probably one of the bigger reasons why the Fantastic Four are always at the center of every new adventure, basically. Of every new crossover event book in Marvel. And so, I'm sorry, people are texting me, but that's kind of what I like about them. Like, they have an underrated villain roster, which consists of Doctor Doom, you know, Galactus, Silver Surfer, Annihilus, Prince Namor, the Submariner. You've heard of him. He was an on again, off again villain slash anti-hero friend of theirs, basically. And who else? I mentioned Blastar, the Bomb Burst, the living Bomb Burst, I should say. The Mad Thinker was another one. He's not really well known. The Puppet Master's one that actually Ben Grimm had a relationship with the Puppet Master's daughter, and they're all long time FF. Ooh, I found a toy. FF like characters or mainstay characters, and times change. The like everything, like the group changes after a while. They different people become leaders. Like Ben Grimm becomes the leader of the FF at one point. Ben Grimm loses his ability to be the Thing at one point. He oh my gosh, stop yawning. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry, everyone. Him and Alicia are a couple, and then they break up, and actually Alicia gets with Johnny Storm after a while. And I guess what I love is that there's so much world building in that book. Like, there's so much ridiculous in it too. Like, there's one point where Sue has an alternate, basically an S&M dominatrix as an alternate Psyche, where she becomes Malice. Like, there's that. There's so much that I just can't think of off the top of my head. But I like that they each have their different era. Like, okay, John Byrne came in and wrote and kind of revolutionized the FF, reintroduced made them popular again, which is kind of what he does. Even though I can't agree with his personal politics, he's definitely a great storyteller and a great artist too. And he changed things up. He originally he got Ben out of the group, and She-Hulk became a member of the FF for a while. And she wouldn't be like they've had a ton of people. They've had Ant-Man, Scott Lang, ironically, the one in the movies right now. He's been a member of the FF at one point, although he doesn't consider himself one. But my favorite, and I totally haven't mentioned him yet, but my favorite is Spider-Man. And at one point, years later, this is a Jonathan Hickman wrote story. Spider-Man became the substitute for Johnny Storm when Johnny Storm unfortunately passed away. They actually killed Johnny off, though honestly he obviously wasn't dead, because no comic book character in the history of the world besides maybe the Flash, Barry Allen, stays dead for forever, you know. Like, I shouldn't say comic book hero, that's the more accurate thing. Not like, because Uncle Ben's dead. Uncle Ben's not coming back. But Barry Allen went away for 23 years or something like that. But anyways, I'm kind of rambling. So, Spider-Man. Spider-Man's had a long history with the FF, and I think one of the big reasons why I also love the Fantastic Four is their association over the years with Spider-Man. And ironically, or unironically, one of my favorite characters that they've ever had, or that Marvel's ever had, Venom, was basically dealt with a lot of the time with Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four. A lot of the history of Venom is tied up in Spider-Man knowing the Fantastic Four, and because Spider-Man's he discovered the symbiote at the Secret Wars, that black and white suit that everyone loves, and it was Reed Richards that determined it was actually an alien symbiote from the Beyonders planet, and so Reed and Johnny helped Spider-Man get the suit off of him because it was essentially trying to suck his life force out of him, basically. So, okay, well, where am I going with this? So yeah, they did that, and then after that, when Spider-Man went toe-to-toe with Venom, he used, Venom came into being, and he used Reed Richards' Sonic Blaster to kind of, because Reed Richards discovered that the symbiote was could be affected by sonic airway, like the sound of sonic blasts or whatever, and it would be disrupted. And so he basically gave Spidey a sonic gun to stop him the first time, and they've even helped, like Reed and Johnny and all them helped him against Carnage before, because they know, but they've had a long, close relationship, and there's been what-if stories like this picture here, where Spider-Man was once considered the 5th member of the Fantastic Four. I kind of want to buy that comic because I've seen it in the stores lately, and I thought, oh man, that would be awesome to own. The very first Marvel What If is what if Spider-Man was the 5th member, and they've had a huge, long history together. They've been in each other's comics for years. Spider-Man's the go-to key character of the Marvel Universe, where everyone has a history with Spider-Man. But the thing is, some connections are stronger than others. Like, for example, Spidey has a strong connection with the Punisher and Daredevil, and he also has a strong connection to the Fantastic Four. Not so much, and Doctor Strange probably a little, not as much, but it's still there. But other characters like the X-Men, not really. He has those connections. He's worked with the X-Men, but not seen it as special as when he's worked with the FF or Daredevil and Punisher or Doctor Strange. So because the FF are the very first in Marvel history, Spider-Man actually respects Reed Richards' scientific knowledge, and has a grudge match with Johnny, because Johnny Storm's a little a shit, and he's he's a troublemaker. But now, if I think I'll end this by offering reading recommendations. I guess the first big one is, if you can get a copy of the Marvel, either Masterworks or the Ultimate Collection or something like that. The Stan and Jack's first however many comics they wrote together are essential reading for the Fantastic Four. After that, you get some decent stories here and there, but after that, the guy who revolutionized it next would be John Byrne. He wrote from issue 232 to around 293, 292, somewhere around there. So he wrote a good solid 5 years on the Fantastic Four. His run is considered, classic. He changed things up so much for the FF as a team. And I'd say that the other books recommended should be the Ultimate Fantastic Four by Mark Millar, which actually introduced the Marvel Zombie Universe, and Jonathan Hickman's run on Fantastic Four and FF when they became the Future Foundation, and Spider-Man was the stand-in member for Johnny Storm, as I alluded to earlier. I think that's it, really. I mean, I can't really see. I think the Ultimate, yeah. So those are the best books. If you want to get started on FF, those are the books to read for sure. So I think that'll be it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you'll come back for my, why I love Superman and Spider-Man and many more. I'm assuming I will make more, because obviously the FF aren't the only books I like, even though they're probably the one I talk about the most. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and supporting the channel. I just wanted to say thank you for that, and If you want, follow me on Twitter at GinaXXGod. Obviously. Okay, thanks again for watching, guys. Peace out.